Ashes of Tomorrow, a dystopian novel. The war did not end with a bang, nor with a whimper, but with a silence so deep it swallowed the world whole. They called it the Last War, not because it was the final conflict humanity would ever face, but because after it, there was no one left to name the next one. The bombs fell, the fires raged, and when the smoke cleared, the earth was a graveyard of steel and bone. The survivors crawled from the wreckage, blinking at a sun veiled in ash. They whispered to each other in the dark, afraid that if they spoke too loudly, the ghosts of the old world might hear them. This is not a story of how the world ended. This is a story of what came after. Chapter 1. The Scavenger. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the city, carrying with it the scent of rust and decay. Cale Mercer moved like a shadow between the crumbling buildings, his boots crunching on broken glass. He kept one hand on the knife at his belt, the other clutching a tattered canvas bag. Today's haul. A half-empty can of beans, a rusted lighter, and if he was lucky, clean water. Not enough. He crouched behind a collapsed billboard, its faded advertisement still screaming about a luxury that no longer existed. In the distance, a pack of wild dogs snarled over something in the rubble. Cale ignored them. His eyes were fixed on the figure moving through the ruins ahead. A stranger. That was rare these days. Most survivors stuck to their own clans, their own territories. Anyone wandering alone was either desperate, dangerous, or both. Cale hesitated. He could slip away, avoid the risk. But strangers carried news. News meant trade. Trade meant survival. He adjusted the strap of his rifle and stepped forward. The stranger turned, and Cale froze. It wasn't a scavenger. It was a child. Chapter 2. The Ghost Child. The girl couldn't have been older than 10. Her face was smeared with dirt, her dark hair tangled with ash, but her eyes, sharp, too knowing, locked onto Cale's with an unsettling stillness. She didn't run, didn't scream, just stared. Cale lowered his rifle, but he didn't relax. Kids didn't last long in the wastes alone. If she was here, there was a reason. "You lost?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. She tilted her head, considering him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then, without a word, she turned and darted between two collapsed buildings. Cale cursed under his breath. He shouldn't follow. Every instinct told him this was a trap. Maybe raiders using her as bait, maybe one of the cults that roamed the dead cities. But something about her silence, the way she moved, like she wasn't afraid of the ruins at all, made him hesitate. Then he heard it. A whisper of sound. Too rhythmic to be the wind. Singing! The girl had disappeared into the shadows, but the sound drifted back to him, faint and haunting. A lullaby, one he recognized. His mother had sung it to him, years ago, before the fires. Cale's chest tightened. No, that's impossible, he followed. The trail led him to the hollowed-out shell of an old subway station, its entrance choked with debris. The singing grew clearer, echoing up from the darkness below. Cale lit his last flare, the red glow painting the cracked tiles in bloody light. Down the broken escalator, through a maze of collapsed tunnels until he found her. The girl stood in the center of an empty platform, her back to him. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic. Old blood, maybe. "Who are you?" Cale demanded. She turned slowly, and this time he saw it, the faint glow of her eyes in the dark. Not a trick of the light, not human. "I'm Alira," she said, her voice too soft, too old for her face. "And you're the one they're waiting for." Chapter 3. The Waiting Ones. Cale's grip tightened on his rifle. The flare's dying light flickered, casting long skeletal shadows across the subway walls. The girl, Alira, watched him with those impossible eyes, unblinking. "Who's waiting for me?" he growled. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the folds of her ragged coat and pulled out a small rusted pendant. Cale's breath caught. He knew that pendant. It had been his sister's. "Lena!" She'd been wearing it the day the bombs fell. The day he'd lost her. "Where did you get this?" His voice was raw, barely controlled. Alira tilted her head as if listening to something he couldn't hear. Then, without warning, she turned and walked toward the far end of the platform, where the tunnel yawned like a throat. "Follow," she said. Cale hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. But the pendant, Lena's pendant, burned in his mind. If there was even a chance! He followed. The tunnels swallowed them whole. The flare sputtered out, leaving only the faint glow of Alira's eyes to guide him. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of damp concrete and something else, something alive. Then, a sound. Voices. Not the harsh barks of raiders, not the feverish chants of cultists. These were whispers, overlapping, soft. Human. The tunnel opened into a cavernous space, an old maintenance chamber, now lit by flickering lanterns. And there, huddled in the dim light, were people. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. All gaunt, all watching him with the same eerie stillness as Alira. At the center stood a woman, her face lined with scars and time. She stepped forward, and the others parted like water. "Cale Mercer," she said. "We've been waiting." Cale's pulse roared in his ears. He didn't recognize her, but she knew his name. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. The woman smiled, slow and sad. "The last ones who remember." Behind her, a figure shifted in the shadows. A figure with Lena's face. Chapter 4. The Bones of Memory. For a heartbeat, Cale was 12 years old again, standing in the burning wreckage of his neighborhood, screaming his sister's name into the smoke. "Lena!" She looked older now. Of course she did, but it was her. The same sharp cheekbones, the same stubborn set to her jaw, but her eyes, those were different. Hollow. Like something had been carved out of her. Cale's rifle clattered to the ground. "You're dead," he whispered. Lena didn't move. The scarred woman, the leader, placed a hand on her shoulder as if holding her in place. "No," the woman said. "Not dead. Changed." The survivors circled Cale like ghosts. They didn't touch him, didn't speak, just watched. Alira stood at Lena's side, her small fingers curled around Lena's wrist, a gesture too familiar for strangers. "How long has she been here?" The leader, Vera, they called her, gestured to a makeshift chair. "Sit! You'll want to!" Cale didn't move. "Explain, now!" Vera exhaled. The bombs weren't the end. Something else came after. Something in the fallout. A chill crawled down Cale's spine. He'd seen things in the wastes, animals twisted wrong, storms that moved against the wind. "But this, Lena," he said, desperate. "Look at me." His sister's gaze flickered to him, then away. When she spoke, her voice was a broken thing. "You left me." The words hit like a knife. Flashback the day the sky burned. 12-year-old Cale dragging Lena through the streets as the world exploded around them. Smoke choking his lungs, his mother's last words. "Run." Then the impact, the crushing weight of debris, darkness. When he woke, Lena was gone. "Now I looked for you," Cale snarled, fists clenched. "For years." Vera stepped between them. "She doesn't remember, not fully. The radiation, it rewrites the mind, but fragments remain." She hesitated, and she's not the only one. A murmur passed through the group. One by one, they pulled back their sleeves, revealing identical marks on their forearms, a jagged symbol like a lightning bolt cutting through a circle. The same mark Lena had, the same mark Alira had. Cale's blood turned to ice. "What is this?" Vera's face was grim. "A warning and an invitation." Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Chapter 5. The marked Cale reached out, fingers hovering over the jagged symbol on Lena's forearm. The skin around it was raised and discolored like a brand. "Who did this to you?" Lena didn't flinch. "No one. It just appeared." Vera stepped forward, rolling up her own sleeve to reveal the same mark. "It starts as a fever, then the dreams. Then," she gestured to Alira, whose two bright eyes gleamed in the dim light. "You wake up changed." Cale's stomach twisted. Radiation sickness didn't work like this. Alira tugged at his sleeve. "They're calling," she whispered. A beat of silence. Then a pulse. Deep underground, something thrummed, vibrating through the concrete. The lanterns flickered. The survivors tensed, their marks glowing faintly. Lena's head snapped up. "They know you're here." The truth in the dark. Vera led him to a rusted maintenance hatch in the floor. Below, a staircase spiraled into blackness. "The war wasn't just ours," she said. "Something else was fighting through us." And when the dust settled, she pushed the hatch open. A stale, metallic wind rose from the depths. It stayed. Cale peered down. The stairs vanished into shadow, but far below something shimmered. Alira pressed against his side. "You hear it too, don't you?" And he did. A hum. Not a machine, a voice. Lena's fingers brushed his wrist. For the first time in years, she looked afraid. "Don't go down there." Cale grabbed a lantern. The survivors recoiled. Vera blocked his path. "If you wake it..." "Wake what?" The ground trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then a screech from the tunnels above. Not human. Not animal. Scavengers. But not the kind that hunted scraps. The kind that hunted marked flesh. Lena shoved him toward the hatch. "Now." Chapter 6. the dark below. The hatch slammed shut above Cale, plunging him into near darkness. The lantern's flickering light barely cut through the thick black as he descended the rusted stairs, each step groaning under his weight. The air grew thicker, humming against his skin like a live wire. "What the hell is down here?" Alira's voice echoed in his mind. "They're calling." The stairs ended abruptly at a cavernous chamber, its walls lined with strange, vein-like tendrils of metallic growth. At the center stood a structure. Not man-made, not natural, a twisted spire of blackened alloy, pulsing faintly with blue light, and wrapped around its base were bones, hundreds of them. Cale's breath caught. This wasn't just a shelter, this was a nest! The hum sharpened into words, not in his ears, in his skull. Cale Mercer. He whirled, rifle raised, but there was no one there. The voice came again, layered, dissonant, like a dozen whispers in one. "You were not marked, yet you hear us." The spire's glow intensified. Shadows pooled at its base, shifting, forming shapes, human shapes. Figures in tattered military gear, their faces half melted, their eyes glowing the same eerie blue as the structure. One stepped forward. Its mouth didn't move, but the voice poured out anyway. "We are what remained after the fire. We are the silence between the screams." Cale's finger hovered over the trigger. "What are you?" The figure tilted its head. "The cure! And the disease." Behind him, the hatch burst open. Snarls, claws on metal. The survivors spilled into the chamber, Vera at the front, Lena dragging Alira behind her. "They're inside!" Vera shouted. Cale didn't need to ask who they were. The creatures dropped from the ceiling, emaciated, elongated things, their limbs too many, their mouths too wide. Scavengers. But not the feral packs from the wastes. These were worse. Their skin shimmered, like the spire, like the marked. Lena grabbed Cale's arm, her nails digging in. "They're hungry for it, for us!" The first scavenger lunged. Cale fired. The spire awakens. The gunshot cracked like thunder. The spire shrieked, a sound that wasn't sound, a pain that wasn't pain. The blue light flared, blinding. The scavengers recoiled, but only for a second. Then they attacked in a wave. Cale emptied his clip into the horde, but there were too many. Vera went down, her throat torn open. Alira screamed, a high, piercing note, and the spire answered! The tendrils on the walls moved. They lashed out, impaling scavengers mid-leap, dragging them into the dark. The creatures writhed, dissolving into liquid shadow. The remaining marked survivors collapsed, clutching their arms as their symbols burned brighter. Lena gasped, doubling over. "It's taking them." Cale hauled her up. "We have to go! Now!" But the spire wasn't done. The voice boomed. "You will run! You will always run! But the mark cannot be outrun!" The ground split open. Chapter 7. The Fallen Sky. The ground gave way beneath them. Cale grabbed Lena's wrist as the chamber floor collapsed into a yawning abyss, the spire's blue light flickering like a dying star. Alira let out a cry as the tendrils lashed toward her, not attacking, but embracing, wrapping around her small body like serpents. "She belongs to us!" The voice wasn't just in Cale's head now. It was everywhere. The walls, the air, the blood in his veins. Lena wrenched free of his grip and lunged for Alira. "Let her go!" Tendrils snapped out, striking Lena across the chest. She gasped, her mark flaring crimson as she crumpled. Cale didn't think. He moved. He grabbed a fallen scavenger's jagged bone blade and slashed at the tendrils. Black fluid sprayed, sizzling where it hit his skin. The spire screamed. Alira's eyes flew open. Fully black now. "No whites, let understand," she said, but it wasn't her voice. It was theirs. "We are salvation." Then, a sound like the sky breaking. The ceiling above them split. The light beyond, sunlight, real sunlight, unfiltered by ash, poured through the rupture in the earth. Cale hadn't seen it that bright in years. It burned his eyes, but he couldn't look away, because silhouetted against it were figures. Not scavengers, not survivors. Soldiers. Their armor gleamed strangely, their helmets seamless, their weapons unlike anything from the old world. One raised a gloved hand and the spire recoiled. Alira shrieked. A sound of pure terror. The tendrils dropped her, retreating into the dark. The lead soldier spoke, voice distorted through their visor. "Subject located. Contain the breach." Cale barely had time to drag Lena behind cover before the first shot rang out. The truth in the light. The newcomers moved like ghosts, cutting down the remaining marked with terrifying precision. Not bullets. Energy, searing through flesh without sound. Lena clutched Kale's arm, her breath ragged. They're cleansing us. Elira crawled toward them, her eyes fading back to normal, her small body shaking. They're scared, she whispered. They don't want them to wake up. Them! Kale's blood ran cold, because as the soldiers advanced, the spire's voice returned. Weaker now, but no less horrifying. You delay the inevitable. We are in your blood, in your bones. You cannot kill a god. One of the soldiers froze, then slowly, deliberately removed their helmet. Kale's stomach dropped. The man's eyes were glowing, just like the marked. Chapter 8, The Hidden War. The soldier's glowing eyes locked onto Kale. His face was human, or at least it had been once. Now veins of the same eerie blue light pulsed beneath his skin, branching out from his temples like cracks in glass. You shouldn't be here! His voice was wrong. Too many tones layered into one. Kale raised his scavenged bone blade, stepping between the soldier and Lena. What the hell are you? The soldier didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, listening to something none of them could hear. Then, with a sudden, jerking motion, he slammed his own helmet back on and turned toward his squad. Primary directive unchanged. Contain the breach. Eliminate the infected. The other soldiers moved in unison, weapons humming to life. They weren't here to rescue anyone. They were here to erase them. The marked and the machine. Lena pulled Kale back as a searing blast tore through the space where he'd just stood. They're not human, she hissed. Not fully. They're hybrids. Elira crouched low, her small fingers digging into the rubble. They serve the first ones, she whispered. The ones who made the spire. Kale's mind reeled. None of this made sense, but the proof was right in front of him. The soldiers moved with unnatural synchronicity, their attacks precise, emotionless. And the way that one had changed. A grenade rolled toward them. Not a normal explosion. This one hissed, releasing a cloud of shimmering silver mist. Lena's eyes widened in horror. Nanites! She yanked Kale and Elira behind a collapsed pillar, just as the mist passed over a wounded survivor. The man screamed, then dissolved, his body breaking apart like sand in the wind. Elira's breath came fast. They don't want the spire waking up. They're scared of what it remembers. Kale gripped his blade tighter. Remembers what? The war before the war, Lena said quietly. The one no one talks about. The one we lost. A shadow fell over them. The glowing-eyed soldier stood above, his weapon aimed at Elira's head. Target acquired. The catalyst must be destroyed. Kale moved on instinct. The bone blade sank into the soldier's gut, but instead of blood, light spilled out. The man didn't even stagger. He just looked down, almost curious, as the wound began knitting itself back together. Then he backhanded Kale hard enough to send him crashing into the spire's base. The spire remembers. Pain exploded through Kale's skull. His vision blurred, then shifted. Suddenly, he wasn't in the cavern anymore. He was somewhere else. A city, but not like any he'd ever seen. Towers of living metal stretched into a violet sky. Beings of light and shadow walked among humans, tapped their voices like music. Then fire, falling from the heavens, screams, and a voice, vast and ancient, shaking the stars themselves. You were never meant to remain. The vision shattered. Kale gasped, back in the present, his hands pressed against the spire's surface. It was warm, and it was awake. Chapter 9. The Cost of Remembering. The spire's surface burned against Kale's palms. The visions still flickered at the edges of his sight. Cities of light, a sky full of falling fire, the terrible voice that shook the world. But the soldier was still coming. Elira screamed as the hybrid's hand closed around her throat. Lena lunged, but another soldier intercepted her, slamming her to the ground with inhuman strength. Kale tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy, sluggish. The spire was pulling at him, whispering in a language he shouldn't understand, but somehow did. You see now. You know. The glowing-eyed soldier tightened his grip on Elira. Catalyst termination in progress. Then, a pulse. The spire's light flared blinding white. The cavern shuddered, cracks racing up the walls as the tendrils lashed out like whips. One speared straight through the soldier's chest. He didn't scream. He just stopped. His glowing eyes dimmed. His body went rigid. Then, slowly, he turned his head, not toward Kale, but toward the other soldiers, and spoke in the spire's voice. You do not command me! The fractured mind. Chaos erupted. The remaining soldiers opened fire, not on Kale or the survivors, but on their own comrade. The corrupted hybrid moved faster than should have been possible, dismantling them with brutal efficiency. Lena scrambled to Alira's side. The girl was gasping, her small fingers pressed to the mark on her arm, now glowing as bright as the spire itself. "It's using him," she whispered, "just like it wants to use us." Kale grabbed Lena's shoulder. "What the hell is happening?" Lena's eyes were wide, terrified. "It's not just a machine, Kale. It's alive, and it's been asleep for a long time." The last soldier fell. The corrupted hybrid stood amidst the carnage, his head tilted as if listening to a distant song. Then, without warning, he exploded in a burst of blue light. The spire's voice echoed through the chamber. "They will send more. You must go deeper." The way down. A section of the cavern wall slid open, revealing a passage Kale knew hadn't been there before. The air that rushed out was cold, sterile, wrong. Alira pulled free of Lena's grip and ran toward it. "Alira! No!" Lena shouted. But the girl didn't stop. She paused at the threshold, looking back at Kale with those two old eyes. "It's the only way," she said. "If they catch me, they'll wipe everything again! Please!" Kale looked at Lena, at the mark on her arm, still pulsing faintly, at the soldiers' dissolving bodies. He had no weapons left, no allies except a sister who wasn't entirely his sister anymore, and a child who might not be a child at all. But the spire was awake, and whatever was down that passage, it had been waiting for them. Chapter 10, The First Ones. The passage swallowed them whole. Kale's boots clicked against a floor too smooth to be stone, too cold to be metal. The walls pulsed with the same eerie blue light as the spire, veins of luminescence threading through the darkness like roots. Alira walked ahead, her small hand trailing along the wall as if she were following a map only she could see. Lena's breath fogged in the frigid air. "This isn't a ruin," she whispered. "It's a tomb." Then the passage opened, and Kale saw them. The First Ones. The Chamber of the Forgotten. The cavern was vast, domed like the inside of a cathedral, but the figures lining the walls weren't statues. They were corpses. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, encased in translucent pods, their features eerily preserved. They were tall, too tall to be human, their limbs elongated, their skin a shade of gray that shimmered faintly in the low light. Their faces were smooth, eyeless, their mouths sewn shut with threads of silver. At the center of the chamber stood a dais, and atop it, a throne! Not for a king, for a god! Alira approached it slowly, her fingers trembling. "They weren't supposed to die," she murmured. "They were supposed to sleep." Kale's stomach twisted. "Who are they?" Lena answered, her voice hollow. "The ones who built the world, the ones who burned it." The memory in the blood, a sound behind them. The passage they'd come through sealed itself, the walls merging seamlessly as if they'd never been there at all. Movement. One of the pods opened. The corpse inside didn't collapse. It stepped forward, its sewn-shut mouth twitching, its eyeless face turning toward them. Alira didn't run. She knelt. "Veshal," she whispered. The corpse reached out a skeletal hand and spoke without speaking. "You have returned, little light!" Kale's mark, the one he didn't even know he had, burned like fire beneath his sleeve. Chapter 11. The Gods Who Failed. The corpse's fingers hovered just above Alira's forehead, its skeletal hand trembling with something like reverence. The cycle was not meant to break, it whispered into their minds. We were to sleep and wake and begin again. Kale's vision swam. The mark on his arm, when had it appeared, throbbed in time with the corpse's words. He could feel the thing's voice in his bones, rattling through him like a second heartbeat. Lena grabbed his arm, her nails biting into his skin. "Don't listen," she hissed. "It's not speaking, it's rewriting." But it was too late. The chamber dissolved around them, and Kale remembered. The before. An age ago, when the sky was still blue and the earth still green, they came, the first ones, architects, gods. They found humanity frail, flawed, but fascinating, a species capable of both creation and annihilation in equal measure. And so they shaped them, guided them, gave them gifts, cities that breathed, machines that dreamed, knowledge that burned. But humanity was not meant to hold such power. The first war was not with bombs, but with ideas, with infection. The first one's gifts changed those who wielded them, warping flesh and mind alike. Some embraced it, others fought back, and so the architects made their choice. If humanity could not be trusted with their legacy, they would erase it. Start anew. They called it the Great Culling. But something went wrong. The vision shifted. The first ones, kneeling in their temples, preparing for their long sleep. Their hybrids, part human, part something other, standing guard, sworn to wake them when the world was clean again. But the hybrids had a different plan. They had tasted freedom. They had no desire to bow again. And so, when the first ones slept, the hybrids lied. They told the survivors that the gods were dead. They burned the histories. They built their own kingdoms atop the ruins. And when humanity rose again, stumbling from the ashes, the hybrids made sure they never remembered what had come before. The awakening. Kale gasped, back in the chamber, his knees buckling under the weight of the truth. The corpse, Veshal, lowered its hand. The spire was our last sentinel. It sleeps and wakes and watches. And now it has called us back. Alira's eyes were full of tears. "They're coming," she whispered. "All of them." A sound like cracking ice filled the chamber. One by one, the pods began to open. Chapter 12. The Wrath of Sleeping Gods. The pods split open like overripe fruit, a hiss of ancient air escaping as the first ones stepped forward. Their movements were jerky at first, limbs stiff from centuries of stillness, but with each step they grew more fluid, more awake. Kale backed away, his body screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. The chamber had sealed behind them. The only exit was the das and the throne. Alira stood frozen, caught between terror and awe, as Veshal turned its eyeless face toward the others. "The hybrids have lied," it intoned. "The world remains unclean." One of the newly awakened first ones raised a hand, and the wall beside it melted, reforming into a weapon, a blade of liquid metal that curled like a living thing. Lena grabbed Kale's arm. "They're going to finish what they started," she breathed. Another culling. The first strike. The nearest first one moved faster than thought. One moment it stood by its pod. The next it was inside one of the remaining marked survivors. A man named Reth, who had followed them down. Reth didn't even have time to scream. His body twisted, his bones snapping as something beneath his skin rearranged him. His mark burned white-hot, his mouth stretching too wide, his fingers elongating into claws. When he looked up, his eyes were gone. Only light remained. "We will remake you," the thing that had been Reth said. "As we were meant to." Then it lunged. Kale barely dodged, dragging Lena with him as the transformed Reth tore through the air where his throat had been. Alira screamed, but not in fear. In fury! "No!" She threw herself at the dais, her small hands slamming against the throne. A pulse of energy exploded outward, throwing the first ones back like leaves in a storm. The chamber shuddered, cracks racing up the walls as the throne activated, its surface shifting, revealing a control panel of sorts. But one made of flesh, not metal. Veshal staggered, its voice a roar in their minds. "You do not understand what you have done, child!" Alira turned, her eyes glowing with the same light as the spire. "I understand exactly what I've done," she said. Then she pulled. The hybrid's last gambit. The throne screamed. A holographic projection erupted above it, showing the surface, the ruins, the wasteland, the sky, and descending from that sky, sleek and silent, were ships. Hybrid ships. Hundreds of them. Lena's breath caught. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew the first ones would wake eventually. They've been waiting." Alira's voice was small but steady. "They're going to bomb the spire, and everything within it." Kale's blood turned to ice. The hybrids didn't want to control the first ones. They wanted to erase them, and everyone still inside. Chapter 13. The choice that breaks the world. The hologram flickered, ships descending, weapons charging, the countdown to annihilation pulsing in the air like a dying star. Kale's hands clenched into fists. There was no time. No good choice. Only survival. Veshal turned its eyeless face toward him. "You carry our mark now. You are ours!" Lena snarled. "Like hell he is." Alira's small hands trembled against the throne. "They'll kill everyone," she whispered. "The hybrids don't care who they burn." A tremor rocked the chamber. Dust rained from the ceiling. The hybrids had begun their assault. Kale looked at Lena, her jaw set, her eyes fierce. At Alira, too young for this, too old for this. Then at the first ones, their hollow faces waiting. He made his decision. The bargain. Stop the hybrids, Keel demanded, stepping toward Veshal. You want to remake the world? Save it first! The first one tilted its head. And in return? Let the marked go. No rewriting. No culling. A beat of silence. Then no. The ground shook again. A crack split the dais, snaking toward the throne. Alira gasped. They're here! The wall detonated. Hybrid soldiers poured in, their weapons humming, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. The first ones moved as one, their bodies shifting, limbs elongating into bladed appendages. Chaos erupted. Kale ducked as an energy blast seared past his head, scorching the air. Lena grabbed a fallen hybrid's weapon, firing wildly. Alira clung to the throne, her eyes squeezed shut, her lips moving in silent prayer. Then, a scream. Not from the battle, from inside Kale's mind. The spire's voice, raw with fury, "You will not take this from me again!" The throne erupted in light. The Alira's body went rigid. Her mark blazed crimson, her veins glowing beneath her skin. The throne's fleshy controls twisted around her, fusing with her small hands. And then, she spoke with a voice that was not her own. Activate Protocol Final Dawn. The chamber lurched. The walls peeled back, revealing the sky, or what was left of it. The hybrid ships froze, their engines stuttering, and from beneath the earth something stirred, something older. Veshal recoiled. No, not it. Kale didn't understand, not until he saw the shadow rising from the ruins. A second spire. Bigger. Hungrier. Chapter 14. The second spire. The ground split apart like rotten fruit, vomiting forth the second spire, a monstrous twin to the first, but larger, darker, its surface writhing with something that wasn't quite metal and wasn't quite flesh. The air itself warped around it, vibrating with a sound like 1,000 voices screaming underwater. The hybrid ships scattered. Veshal stumbled back, its skeletal hands twitching. It was not meant to wake. Not ever. Kale didn't need to ask what it was. The second spire pulsed and the world shuddered. The hunger. Alira collapsed against the throne, her small body convulsing. The mark on her arm had spread, crawling up her neck like black veins. When she opened her eyes, they were gone, replaced by the same hollow light as the first ones. It's calling, she whispered, but her voice was layered. Wrong. It's so hungry. Lena lunged for her, but the throne's fleshy tendrils lashed out, wrapping around her wrists. Alira, fight it! The girl shuddered. I can't. It's too loud. Kale turned to Veshal. What is that thing? The first one's voice was hollow. Our sin, our failure. Then the second spire moved. It wasn't just a structure. It was alive. The spire unfurled, its surface peeling back in jagged segments, revealing a core of writhing liquid shadow. It lurched toward the nearest hybrid ship and consumed it. The vessel dissolved midair, its metal screaming as it was pulled into the spire's depths. The other ships opened fire. Plasma bolts, missiles, weapons Kale didn't have names for, all useless. The spire absorbed them, growing larger with every hit. Veshal gripped Kale's arm, its bony fingers biting deep. It does not just feed on matter, it feeds on memory, on time. A hybrid soldier nearby twitched, then screamed as his body collapsed inward, his very existence unraveling. The second spire wasn't just killing, it was erasing. Alira gasped, her back arching as the throne's tendrils burrowed deeper. It wants me to open the way, she choked out. It wants to eat everything. Lena tore free, grabbing Kale's face. We have to stop it. Now! How? He snarled. Veshal stepped forward. There is one way, but it will cost you. It pointed to the mark on Kale's arm, the one he hadn't realized was there until it was too late. The same mark as the throne. The same mark as Alira. You are bonded now, Veshal said. You can take her place. Kale understood. He could save Alira, but he would have to become the throne. Chapter 15. The Sacrifice. Kale didn't hesitate. He stepped toward the throne, his marked arm outstretched. The tendrils slithered away from Alira, sensing his intent, and wrapped around his wrist instead. The pain was instant, white-hot, searing, as if his veins were being replaced with molten wire. Alira collapsed into Lena's arms, gasping, her eyes flickering back to normal. Kale, no! But it was too late. The throne claimed him, the becoming. The world dissolved. Kale was no longer in the chamber, no longer himself. He was everywhere. The spires were his bones, the ruins were his flesh, the sky was his breath. He could feel the hybrid's ships like gnats buzzing at the edge of his awareness, the first one's fear like a cold blade in his gut, and the second spire, the devourer, was part of him now. It hungered, and it listened. The first one's memories that were not his own flooded his mind. The first ones had built the devourer as a weapon, a way to erase their enemies from existence, but it grew too powerful, too sentient. It turned on them, consuming entire worlds before they finally trapped it beneath the earth, burying it in eternal sleep. And now it was awake. And it remembered its purpose. "Cale Mercer," it whispered through the throne. "You are the key. You are the end." Cale gritted his teeth. "I'm not letting you out." The devourer laughed. "You already have!" The last stand. The throne's power surged through him. He could feel Alira's consciousness flickering at the edges of his own. Lena screaming his name. The hybrids and first ones still fighting below. He had a choice. He could control the devourer, or destroy it, but both would cost him everything. Veshal's voice cut through the chaos. "You must decide, now." Cale closed his eyes and pushed. The end and the beginning. The second spire screamed! A shockwave ripped through the ruins, tossing ships like paper, sending the first ones to their knees. The devourer's core fractured, its shadowy form unraveling at the edges. Cale's body burned. He could feel himself dissolving, the throne's power eating him alive. But it was working. The devourer was dying. Alira's hand found his, her small fingers clinging tight. "Don't let go," she begged. Cale smiled. "And let go." "Silence! Light!" Chapter 16. Ashes and Embers. The light faded. Silence settled over the ruins like a shroud. Lena was the first to move, her body aching, her vision blurred with ash and tears. She crawled forward, her fingers digging through the debris where Cale had stood moments before. Only dust remained. And the throne, shattered, inert. Alira knelt beside her, her small hands trembling as she pressed them to the broken earth. "He's not gone," she whispered. "Not all the way." The world after. The devourer had collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only a gaping crater where the second spire had been. The hybrids were decimated, their ships reduced to smoldering wrecks. The surviving first ones, those who hadn't fled or been erased, stood motionless, their hollow faces turned toward the sky. Veshal was the last to leave. It paused beside Lena, its voice a whisper in her mind. "The mark remains. The story is not over." Then it, too, was gone. The mark's legacy. They buried the dead. The survivors, human and marked alike, gathered at the edge of the crater, their faces gaunt, their eyes haunted. Some whispered Cale's name like a prayer. Others cursed it. Alira stood apart, her hands clasped around the only thing they'd found in the ruins, a single, unbroken pendant. Lena's pendant, the one Cale had carried all these years. She pressed it into Lena's palm. "He wanted you to have it." Lena closed her fingers around it, her throat tight. "Now what?" Alira looked toward the horizon where the first pale streaks of dawn were breaking through the ash. The last light. Deep beneath the earth, in the ruins of the throne, something flickered. A spark, a whisper, a name. Cale. And then, Scyther's note. Ashes of Tomorrow was born from a question. What remains of us when the world ends? Not just our bodies, not just our stories, but the choices we make in the darkest hours. Cale, Lena, and Alira's journey was never about survival. It was about what we do with it. To you, the reader, thank you for walking these ruined roads with them. The mark remains. The story is not over. The end.